Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
In May of the year 2025, Donald Trump is the President of the United States. He holds an important job. He makes many decisions for the country. Because he is the leader, many people want to know what others think about his work. Do people like the job he is doing? Are they happy with the way things are going? To find out what people think, groups use polls. A poll is like a big survey. They ask many people simple questions. One question is often, do you approve or disapprove of the job the president is doing? The answers from these polls give us a number. This number is called the president's job approval rating. President Trump's job approval rating is often talked about. You can see it in the news. It is a way to see how popular the president is at a certain time. These numbers do not stay the same. They can go up. They can go down. They change because of many things that happen in the country and in the world. Recently, in spring 2025, there have been changes in President Trump's approval numbers. Some polls showed his approval went up a little. Other polls showed it stayed about the same, maybe still low compared to other presidents in the past. These changes are interesting. They make people ask questions. Why did the numbers move? What happened to make people change their minds even just a little? Understanding these changes is important. It helps us understand what people in the country care about. It shows us what might be affecting their lives. When the economy changes, or when big decisions are made about laws or other countries, people's opinions can change. These changes show up in the approval numbers. This story will look closely at these changes in President Trump's approval rating. We will look at what the polls from spring 2025 showed. We will see the numbers and how they compare to before. Then, we will try to understand some of the reasons why these numbers might have changed. We will think about different things that were happening at that time. Looking at the reasons helps us see a bigger picture. It helps us connect events in the country and the world to what people are thinking. It is like putting pieces of a puzzle together. The president's approval rating is one piece of that puzzle. The things happening in the economy are other pieces. Decisions about rules and laws are more pieces. What happens with other countries is also part of it. This first chapter is an introduction. It tells you what this story is about. It is about President Trump's approval numbers in May 2025. It is about how they changed and why those changes matter. We will explore this topic in the following chapters. Learning about these shifts in approval is important for everyone who wants to understand the current situation in the United States. It helps us see what people are thinking and feeling about the president and his work. 2. Numbers change. In spring of 2025, people across the United States looked closely at numbers from polls. These polls asked people how they felt about the job President Donald Trump was doing. This is called his approval rating. It is a way to see how much support the president has from the people in the country. In May of 2025, Donald Trump is the real president of the United States. The polls taken during spring 2025 showed different numbers for President Trump's approval rating. Many surveys placed his approval around the middle of 40%. For example, some polls showed his approval was about 44%. Other polls showed it a little lower, maybe around 41%. These numbers mean that less than half of the people who answered the polls said they approved of the job he was doing. Recently, these approval numbers showed a small change. There was a small rise in President Trump's approval rating in some of the polls. This was a modest increase. For instance, some reports noted that his approval went up by a few points from late April to mid-May. It moved from the low 40% range up to the mid-40% range for some surveys. This small rise meant a few more people approved of his work compared to the weeks just before. It is helpful to compare these recent numbers to the time when President Trump first started his term again this year. When he began his term, his approval rating was slightly higher for a very short time. On the day he became president, some surveys showed it was about 47%. But after that, the numbers went down. During his first 100 days in office this term, President Trump's approval rating was historically low. This means it was lower than the approval rating for almost any other president at the same point in their first term for many, many years. Polls taken around the 100-day mark in April showed his approval was around 39%. This number was reported as the lowest first 100-day approval rating for a United States president in over 80 years. This shows that his start to this term was seen less positively by the public compared to many presidents in history. Different polls often show slightly different results. One poll might say 44% approve, while another survey might say 41%. This can happen because different polls ask different groups of people or use slightly different methods. However, most major polls in spring 2025 showed a similar picture. They showed President Trump's approval was generally in the mid-40s range, and that it had been a little lower earlier in the spring. Even with the small recent rise, the numbers also showed that many people did not approve of the job President Trump was doing. In most surveys, more people said they disapproved than approved. The numbers showed that his overall approval rating was still not very high when compared to many presidents from the past at this point in their time in office. But the numbers did clearly show an upward movement, even if small, in spring 2025 compared to the weeks right before. These changing numbers are important to watch. They show that public opinion about the president is not always the same and can shift over time. The numbers about how people feel can change, and this chapter shows some of that recent change. 3. Money and jobs. Money and jobs are very important for people. When people worry about money, it can change how they feel about the country's leader. In spring 2025, many people were worried about the economy. Surveys showed that not many people approved of how the president handled the economy. This was a change from the start of the year. People were afraid that the president's plans might cause problems with money for the country. This kind of big problem with money is called a recession. One big reason for worries was about tariffs. Tariffs are like extra taxes on things that come from other countries. The president put many tariffs on goods from other places. People thought these tariffs made prices higher in the stores. When prices go up, people have less money to spend. Many people did not like these tariffs. The market where people buy and sell parts of companies also showed these worries. This is called the stock market. The stock market went down a lot. This happened after the president talked about more tariffs. The stock market falling made people more afraid about the economy. Many people said they were very afraid that the country was going to have a recession. They thought the president's actions, like the tariffs, were making things worse. When the president made some changes and stopped some planned tariffs, the stock market got better. This showed that the money situation and people's feelings about it were connected to the president's actions. Different groups of people felt differently about the economy. People who usually support the president still mostly felt good about how he handled money. However, people who don't follow the news very closely, who voted for the president before, started to feel less happy. When they saw news about the stock market going down and prices going up, they began to have doubts. The story about money and jobs was a big reason why some people changed their opinion about the president. The fear of prices going up and the possibility of a recession made many people worry. This worry about the economy was a main cause for shifts in how people saw the president at this time. Even though his strongest supporters stayed with him on the economy, some other voters did not like what they saw happening with prices and jobs. 4. Rules in the country. President Trump made many new rules and big decisions for the country. He used his power in a strong way, faster than usual. He signed many papers called executive orders. These orders made changes quickly in different parts of the government. He changed how some government groups worked. He also made new rules for things like the environment and health. He even made changes to places for art and culture that the government supports. Many people felt worried about how much power he used. They thought he used too much power without asking others enough. People believed strongly that the president must follow the rules made by the courts, even if he did not agree with them. A large number of people felt it was not right for him to stop giving money to universities. They thought this was wrong, especially if he did it because he did not like the ideas taught there. Actions like putting himself on the board of a famous arts center, removing government workers he disagreed with, and saying he might punish schools made some people feel less happy with the president. These actions seemed too strong to some. One area where President Trump kept more support from the public was on rules about people coming into the country. Many people agreed with his strict rules about the borders. They supported his ideas on who could enter the country legally and who could not. Polls showed that almost half of the people in the country supported these strong immigration rules. This was different from other issues where he had less public agreement. The idea of making borders safer was popular with many. But there were concerns about national safety and how the government managed important secrets. People thought it was not safe or smart when government workers talked about a military plan, like stopping fighting in a place called Yemen, using a message app that was not secret. This incident made many people, including some from his own party, feel that the government was not being careful with important information. This made people doubt how well the government was managing defense and secrets. While many people supported his immigration ideas, fewer people approved of how he handled matters with other countries or national safety issues. These rules and actions had a big effect on how people saw the president. Some people liked that he was making big changes and using his power strongly. They felt he was working hard and keeping promises he made. Other people were unhappy because they thought he was going too far. They felt he was not respecting the normal ways of government or being careful enough with important things. How much people paid attention to the news also played a part in how their views changed. Some people who did not usually follow the news closely started paying more attention when these big things happened. They might not read deep reports, but they heard about the worries about money, the strong use of presidential power, or problems with national safety. When they saw these real events happening, they started to think more about the president and his work. People who did not read or watch much news before were more likely to change their minds when they saw tangible problems or felt worried about the president's actions and rules. This meant that even people who supported him in the past could become unhappy if they saw problems happening in the country because of his rules or decisions. The way the government acted and the rules it made were important for how people felt about President Trump and his leadership. 5. The USA and other countries. The United States of America has many relationships with countries around the world. President Trump often travels to meet leaders from other nations. These trips and meetings are important for the country. In spring of 2025, President Trump made trips to countries in the Middle East. He met with leaders there. One important action he took was about a conflict in Yemen. The USA had been bombing a group there called the Houthis. President Trump announced that the USA would stop these bombings. He said this was because the Houthis agreed to stop attacking ships. Some people in the USA saw this as a good step for peace. Others did not agree with the decision. They thought it was not the right thing to do. Trade with other countries is also a big part of how the USA works with the world. President Trump has focused a lot on trade deals. There were problems with trade, especially with a country like China. President Trump put special taxes, called tariffs, on goods coming from China. This was part of his plan to change how trade worked. These tariffs caused some problems and discussions. Sometimes, the USA and other countries made new trade agreements or changed old ones. People in other parts of the world also have opinions about President Trump. Surveys done in different countries have shown how people outside the USA see him. Often, many people in other countries did not have a positive view of President Trump and his policies. This international view is different from how people inside the USA feel. All these actions and relationships with other countries can affect how people in the USA feel about President Trump. His decisions on foreign policy, like the action in Yemen or the trade issues with China, are watched closely. Polls sometimes ask Americans how they approve of President Trump's handling of foreign affairs. These numbers have often been lower compared to how he is seen on other topics. International events or the lack of big world problems can also play a small role in how people feel about the president at home. When there are no major wars or crises, people might focus more on things happening inside the USA, like the economy or rules. 6. Voting and the future. President Trump's approval numbers are important. They can show how people might vote in the future. When a president has low approval, it can be hard for their party in elections. This is what history tells us. Some presidents in the past had low approval ratings early in their time in office. For example, President Eisenhower and President Truman had lower numbers at one point. Their parties sometimes faced difficulties in elections that followed. However, some presidents, like President Clinton and President Reagan, also had lower approval at times but saw their numbers go up later. They were elected again. Today, President Trump has strong support from people in his own party. His approval among Republicans is high. This is a strong point for him. When we compare his approval to other political leaders, like Senate Majority Leader Schumer or Congress as a whole, President Trump's numbers are often higher. So, even though his approval is low for a president, it is higher than some other leaders. But there are challenges for the future. If people still worry about the economy and prices, President Trump's approval might not get much better. This could make it harder for him and his party in upcoming elections. Some polls show this. For example, one poll in May 2025 looked at a possible future election between President Trump and Vice President Harris. It suggested she might have a small lead. Also, people have ideas about what could happen in the future. A Reuters poll showed that most Americans do not support the idea of President Trump trying to be president for a third time. This includes some people from his own party. This shows a limit to support for him in the long term. However, President Trump has a strong way of connecting with people. He has a big voice in the media. His supporters often stay loyal. Polls can sometimes be wrong, and some people think the current polls might not show the full picture. Upcoming elections, like the ones in 2026, will be important. President Trump's approval could affect how people vote for members of Congress. Some people think his lower approval could make it harder for his party to win seats, but others say that people are also not happy with the other main party right now. The situation is not simple. President Trump's approval numbers show he faces political difficulty. To do better in the future, he might need to change some of his policies or actions to get more support from people who do not belong to his party. But his strong base of support gives him power. How his approval changes will help shape the future of politics in the country. 7. What happens next? Thinking about the future is important. What happens now with President Trump's approval numbers might show us things about future elections. People are watching to see what this means for the 2026 elections, when people vote for members of Congress. It could also show us things about the next time Americans vote for president. History shows that presidents with low approval numbers sometimes have problems in elections that happen in the middle of their time in office. Their political party can lose seats in Congress, but every time is different. President Trump has strong support from people in his own party. This support is still very high for him. The economy is a big part of what could happen next. If the economy gets better, people might feel happier about the president. If the economy faces problems like high prices or people losing jobs, this could make his approval go down more. Many people still worry about money and jobs. There is also talk about President Trump running for president again after his current time ends. This would be for a third term. Many Americans do not like this idea. Polls show that a large number of people are against a president serving a third term. This includes some people who are in his own party. President Trump has a very strong way of connecting with his supporters. He has a big presence in the news and on television and online. He can talk to many people quickly. This helps him keep his base of support strong, even if his overall approval numbers are not very high. When we look back at other presidents, some had low approval numbers early on but got better later. This often happened when the economy improved. Other presidents with low numbers continued to struggle. President Trump's situation is not exactly the same as any other president in history. His current approval levels mean he might need to think about some of his big decisions. Maybe he will change some policies to try and get more support from people who do not strongly support any party. But his strong base of support also means he might not change much. The next few years will show what these numbers really mean. Will the economy help his approval? Will his strong party support be enough? Will new events happen that change how people feel? These questions are important for understanding what comes next for President Trump and for the country. 8. Thinking about it all. President Trump's approval numbers have changed. We looked at why this happened. This chapter helps us think about all the reasons together. One big reason for the changes is the economy. People worried about jobs and money. Many were afraid the country's economy might get worse, maybe even enter a recession. Rules about trade, like putting extra costs on goods from other countries, made some things cost more for people. The stock market went up and down, which made some people feel unsure about the future. These money worries made some people feel less happy with the president's work. But people who strongly support the president often still felt good about the economy. Different groups of people felt differently about the economy under President Trump's leadership. Another reason is about rules inside the country. President Trump made new rules and used his power in strong ways. He signed many official papers to change government groups and rules. Some people liked this use of power. They often liked his ideas about people coming into the country and keeping the border safe. These views helped his approval in some areas. Other people did not like how he used his power. They worried about his decisions on different things, like managing government secrets or how he handled national safety issues. How much people watched the news also changed how they felt about these actions. These different feelings about his rules affected his approval numbers. Things happening with other countries were also part of the story. President Trump traveled to other places and met with leaders from around the world. He made decisions about what the USA does with other countries. For example, he made a decision to stop certain military actions in a place called Yemen after talks. He also worked on trade deals with countries like the United Kingdom and had problems with trade rules with countries like China. What people thought about these actions with other countries also changed their views on the president. There were no big world problems or victories that naturally made everyone support the president more strongly. So the numbers showing President Trump's approval went up and down because of how people felt about the economy, rules in the country, and things with other countries. All these different parts work together and affect each other. The approval numbers are like a report card from the people. What do these approval numbers mean for President Trump and the country? They show how people feel about his leadership and the path the country is on right now. When more people approve, it can make his work easier to do and show support for his plans. When fewer people approve, it can be harder for him to make big changes and shows people want things to be different. These numbers are important for the future. They can show what people might want from their leaders next and how future votes might go. Understanding why the numbers change helps us understand the country better. It shows that the political situation is complex and always changing, with many different ideas and feelings. We have thought about why President Trump's approval numbers shifted. We looked at different reasons from the economy, inside the country and with other countries. We thought about what these numbers mean for his work and the country's direction. It shows that many things affect how people feel about a leader. It is not just one simple thing. Thinking about all this, what do you think is the biggest reason people's views on President Trump change?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.